So the mummies arrive, and the mummies arrive.
The mummies arrive.
Mummies arrive.
Greetings, listeners, to another episode of the Laser Comb Podcast, your favorite podcast where two 90s kids comb through classic television with a fine-tooth laser. I am one of your hosts, Ja-Kal, and I am brought to you by the one and only Siege.
Hello, I am the Siege, one of your hosts.
Yes, indeed. And
today I am cosplaying as a cat.
You're cosplaying as a cat?
If you're audio listeners, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, for the video version of the show, which link in description, I'm using Face Rig and a little VTuber type program to make myself appear as a cat with glasses.
Yes, he's a cat today. And today is episode 52 of the Laser Comb Podcast. We've done it. We've made it all the way to 52.
Yeah, it only took 2 years?
It only took however many long it took us.
Actually, no, we launched this show in September of 2021, so only a few weeks behind, a couple months behind.
Yeah, it's not that bad. We've made it about 49 episodes farther than the average indie podcast, so not bad.
I was reading a podcasting subreddit yesterday, and people were talking about, podcasting burn, and like so many people were like, yeah, so I started off with doing one weekly show, but like I've decided to move to like bi-weekly because I just started feeling the podcast burn, after like my 5th episode.
The podcast burn.
And I'm just like after like 5 episodes, you're already like, I can't do it anymore, man. I just can't do the weekly thing.
Just can't do, man. Like those 3 listeners are like, they mean the world to me, but man, like this is too demanding.
This is too demanding. Meanwhile, we do we miss episodes like here and there, but like we pretty consistently do 2 shows a week, sometimes more.
Consistently, as in like 90% of weeks.
Yeah.
Like whole months and months and months where we're recording at least like 2 episodes, if not like little extra tidbits for Patreon on top of it. Yeah,
Patreon and stuff.
And we made it to 52. And I'm glad we did, because we got a little something called Real Monster. Oh wait, no. It's it's Mummies Alive.
Mummies alive.
Mummies alive, man.
Before we get into that, though, I got a little bit of an update that I wanted to share with you and our fine listening audience, good sir. So you know how you often make the joke about how we always say we're going to watch a show and then totally never do? Well, guess what?
What show didn't you watch this time?
I watched all of Ash vs. Evil Dead. I just finished it last night.
Fuck off.
No, seriously,
I've watched. How many seasons? 4?
3, 30 episodes.
3.
Gone
My
through them all.
man.
Yeah,
Wow.
the show gets wild, and like actually they get way more into mythology than the movies did. Obviously, because like it's a serialized TV show, they got a lot more screen time to do that. But yeah, it gets wild. They travel through time and shit.
Oh, sounds like it gets better.
It does,
Because
yeah.
what was the episode we just? It was season 2.
Season 2, episode 4, DUI. Everything, naturally, but everything in that episode that we were confused by makes complete sense to me now that I've
Oh,
watched the whole series.
I I could piece it together.
Yeah.
Enough of it together, yeah. So what's after watching the entire thing? I'm guessing that gets 2 paws up.
It does, yeah, yeah. And the thing that I was worried about with the gore factor, one, season 2 really ups the ante on the gore compared to season 1. Like season 1's still
Well,
gory,
that
but see,
random one we caught was like so freaking gross.
yeah. Uh season 2 ramps up the gore compared to season 1, but because like watching through season 1, I kind of like steadily like worked my way up to it. It got to a point where by the time it got like ultra gory in season 2, I was kind of used to it.
I am desensitized.
There is one episode where Ash like quite literally has the cadaver of a dude where on top of like Ash has had his head like shoved up the dude's like ass, and he's like gosh he's got this dude's like, and his like his stomach has been completely gutted, and so you see Ash's face through this dude's gut. At that point it's like so
And
comic,
he can
like
see out.
yeah, yeah, at that point it's just like so comical and ridiculous that I'm not even grossed out by it anymore.
It gets to a certain level of comical, like haunted house levels of gore.
Just pure absurdity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
definitely what the movies were going for. Well, there was kind of like a remake. What was that, 2015? 16?
2013, yeah, we talked about it
13,
on that
yeah.
episode.
Yeah, we
Talked about
talked
the
about it
remake.
that episode. Yeah.
And there's a sequel to that coming out called Evil Dead Rise, comes out in April.
If it's not set in medieval fantasy times, I'm going to be angry. Uh,
The Medieval Dead.
I'm- they're missing out. Oh, man. And you know what I missed out on?
What's that?
I missed out on Mummies Alive when I was younger.
Really?
Yep.
You didn't watch this show back in the day?
Nope. I don't know if it was like scheduling or timing or what it was, but I was only vaguely aware of it after I had become an adult, right? Like seeing memes being like, you're a 90s kid, F, and then there's like splash art of like Dunkaroos and like riding bicycles halfway across town and Reboot and like Mummies Alive, and I had never watched it.
Wow. Yeah, this show was on in 1997. It only lasted one season, which is kind of bananas to me. And it only lasted one season, and it was canceled due to low ratings, which is kind of bananas to me because you can pretty much say to anyone our age, like mid 30s, you can say Mummy's Alive, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about.
That's what I mean. I wasn't even familiar with it, and like still know of it just because of so many people fondly talking about
I watched the fuck out of this show back in '97.
it.
Like I watched it a lot. I had VHS tapes of some of the episodes.
Oh, rad. And not to give my rating away, or maybe it was just we caught a particularly juicy episode, but like if most of the episodes are the caliber of this episode that we're watching, like holy shit. This was some of the best TV that must have been on
This
in
show's hype.
1997.
This show is
Like I'm
really
not even
fucking
kidding.
hype.
And that's outside the premise. But they rock the premise and the puns so
Let's kick
tastefully,
tut.
and they time it so well. Like if this isn't one of the best episodes, I would be shocked. If it is consistently this good, this was probably the best show on in 1997.
Next to
I
Beast
like
Wars, of course.
next to Beast Wars, of course. Depending, well,
They were the Transmetals at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's some there there's some episodes of Beast Wars that I'm just saying, if you missed entirely, would probably better your Beast Wars experience. Whole
Yeah,
swaths of Beast Wars that if you had missed it would probably be for the best. I'm talking to you, Vok. Mother
Vok,
Vokers.
mother Vokers. So what is Mummies Alive about? Well, if you want to know, just watch the intro of the show, and they'll tell you.
Yeah.
It'll give you the entire plot over the theme song. A very hype theme song, I might add. The show has really great music. But basically, to kind of summarize, it's about this kid named Presley living in San Francisco who finds out that the reincarnated spirit of Ramses II has been reborn in him. And when that happens, this sorcerer from ancient Egypt 3,000 years ago named Scarab is awakened and wants to harvest Presley's soul so he can gain like eternal life and immortality and whatnot.
Yeah, and he like you said, he's the reincarnation of what was it, Prince Rapses?
Ramses II,
And
the Moses Ramses,
and oh, that guy.
yeah,
Uh
Yul Brenner himself.
and
So when
well, on the
Scarab,
wiki it says Rapses. Maybe they're trying to uh avoid tying him to a real
uh,
person.
I always thought it was Ramses.
Well, that's because that's a real
Oh, maybe.
that's a real pharaoh,
Oh,
right?
who is based on Ramses?
Yeah. Yeah, Rapses.
Weird.
Yeah, I'm looking at these names and I'm like, oh geez, look at these great puns. Rapses. Get it? Because mummies are wrapped.
Ramses the 12th.
Yeah. And so
Anyways,
he's
anyway,
trying to like suck his essence out so that he can become more powerful.
he's trying to go all Raziel and reave that soul. Um, so when Scarab awakens, I'm just gonna keep calling him Ramses because
That's fine.
yeah. um, so when Scarab awakens, Ramses four like royal guard basically, whose names are Ja-Kal, Wrath, voiced by our man Scott McNeil,
That's right.
Armon, whose name is a pun in and of itself, because get it? When he raws up, he gets his arm on.
Yeah.
Armon.
When
Yeah.
he raws up, he gets his arm down. Armon.
Armon, yeah. And Nefertina. Now, her shtick was back in the day, she was masquerading as a dude, so she could be part of the royal guard.
Ah.
If
Very
I
nice.
if I recall correctly, that's a thing that comes up in the first episode when after they've awakened. And to be clear, folks, 1997 was 25 years ago, and until revisiting this episode, I have never rewatched this show. So this is going entirely by memory from when I was 12.
Right.
But if I recall correctly, in the first episode of the show, after the Guardians awaken, they're all surprised when they find out that Nefertina is actually a woman.
Yeah, it says here that she was referred to as Nefer. And yeah, there's like comments like, no wonder he never went swimming in the Nile with all of us.
Yeah.
All right.
Now the Guardians have the ability to a very very 90s thing. They have the
Uh-huh.
ability to summon mystical armor by shouting out with the strength of Ra, and we get a very like anime style, like 1990s anime style, like power up sequence.
Yeah,
It's
they
hype.
all have a different color of aura, right? Like Ja-Kal is like blue, and he gets like it's the past is the future kind of tech. So like they have like Egypt neon punk tech. Oh, your cat is going fucking wild.
It's because I took a drink.
Oh, um, and what is it? Nefertina gets like cat claws, and like they all kind of have like a pharaoh-ish kind of like ancient gods golden
All
kind of look to them.
they're all their armor is all centered around an animal. Like Ja-Kal, I believe, is a hawk.
Yeah, which
Um,
is like Horus or can't
uh,
remember all the Egyptian gods. Forgive me.
Wrath is a snake. Armon is a ram, and Nefertina is a cat.
And the bad guy is Scarab, and he's kind of like a giant scarab dude. He's got like a staff that is also his henchwoman.
Yeah, her name is Heka. She is voiced by Airraiser from Beast Wars.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. And it's really funny because like the the snake familiar, I guess is what it is. It's like a staff and a weapon that shoots lasers and like breathes fire,
Yeah,
but like is also like a character,
yeah.
which is actually kind of like really funny.
Well, I mean, it gives Scarab a sidekick, right?
Yeah. And
The most
is there,
practical of sidekicks, actually, because she seems really intelligent and she can be used as a weapon.
yeah, I don't like the oh you idiots like smacking your hench person around. Like the Hecka actually seems like Hecka smart. What this is episode Goodbye Mr. Chops, I think.
It's a
Yes.
play on Goodbye, Mr. Chips. The
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
even catch that.
yeah. Good. It's about a teacher. Also, the plot of this episode is I know I've seen this in sci-fi before, but like we're two, and I can't. I'm completely drawing a blank. I even went to TV tropes to figure out exactly what it is, but I know I've seen like an episode of something where two characters get linked up by a radio or something, and something goes wrong, and they end up switching places. There's also an episode of Beast Wars that kind of does that too with the transporter, where
It's
it's like
definitely like
where it's like
a
Cheetor
thing.
where it's like Cheetor ends up at the Predacon base and Pterosaur ends up at the Maximal base, and then they end up swapping back.
Yeah, it feels like that's definitely. I couldn't find the trope either, but as soon as it happened, I was like, oh,
I know I've seen an episode of something like some sci-fi show where like there's like some kind of communication device or something, and two characters like touch it at the same time, and they end up like swapping, and one character is like completely out of their element.
one or both characters are out of their element. Yeah.
Yeah, but one in
Um,
particular is like
one
having
in
a worse time.
particular is like, oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of like the idea of I used to have people like in high school be like, oh man, like no, education is like way better now. If you swapped with like a random person from like 1,000 years ago, like you would be like 10 times like smarter than them. And then I'm like, that's weird, like modern day like privileged like boasting. But then the more I learned as I got like older, I'd like tell these people, I'm like, actually, if you swapped with like the random like Roman like citizen, like you'd be considered fucking dumbass to them, man. Like he'd be able to build his own house, probably speak like three, four languages, know how to farm,
And all
like
things
no
considered,
carpentry.
they would probably, because of like modern life is so relatively convenient to how it was back then, they would have a much better time adjusting to
That's
modern
what I was
life
trying
than
to get to
than
say. Yeah.
yeah, than
I'm
you
a
would.
100% sure.
Yeah.
Like if we were thrown back there, the average person here being thrown back there, it doesn't matter if like you can do like grade 12 like calculus. Like what the
Yeah.
fuck are you gonna do in like the Mediterranean like 1,000 years ago
I mean, if Napoleon can go to a water slide,
and
then
have a great time?
and have a great time and eat like an entire like giant thing of
An
ice
entire
cream.
Ziggy Piggy of ice cream.
And go bowling. If Napoleon could do all of that, then shit, most people be having a good time if
Most
they come
people
to
would
the
be having a
future.
good time. Oh yeah, and that goes to show like it's always like, oh man, I wish I existed at that time. Do you? Like this is every year that goes by, like there's advances in like culture and like modern medicine and science. Like can you even imagine going back like to the 90s without your smartphone or without internet? Can you imagine going back like 100 years ago where like people smoked in like the operating rooms?
I could
I,
adjust to go to like not having a smartphone or the internet. I know I
that,
could.
yeah, but
But
I
but
mean,
but the reason why
people,
I know that I could is because I lived in those
it's because we
times.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever people are like, "Oh man, to go back to the Irish Highlands of like 1500," and I'm like, "What? So you can die of fever?" Like, so like you can like get some sort of animal passed on to you by like livestock and die, or get a common cold and then like not have any like way to treat it. Fucking scrape your arm and get gangrene. I
End
no.
up having to have your arm chopped off just because you like
You got a cut on something rusty?
yeah.
No, man. No, I'm fine here. And indeed, most of these mummies are fucking fine here. One in particular, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Nefertina is the one who's like, yeah, modern times, and kind of like the only one who knows how to drive their mummy car. I I love that there's a mummy mobile.
It's
I
called the Hot Raw. It looks like a golden, yeah.
wow.
It's called yeah, it's a golden drag racer basically. And it's not that she's the only one, it's just it's her job is to drive it.
Oh, okay, was she like the chariot?
She was, yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. They all had a role to play. Jakal was kind of
Like
the
the guard,
soldier.
royal guard or something.
Yeah, yeah. And Armon was like he was Ramsey's like personal trainer basically.
Right, yeah, yeah, I'm reading that here.
Wrath was his was a scientist and he was his tutor, and Nefertina was the chariot was in charge of like the chariot.
Nice, nice.
So they all had a different role to play.
Yeah, and they all kind of have a different role to play here, and it lets you know right away because they're driving around and Armand is like, "Hey guys, stop!" And they slam on the brakes in the middle of the road, because that's fine. There's never any traffic in these huge bustling cities in the '90s cartoons. What's up with that?
Because that's just extra cars you have to animate.
That's just extra cars, yeah. And he's like, "Hey guys, there's a new burger place in town." So I'm like, "Ah, got it. I know his thing. He likes food.
Yep.
He's big, he's tough. It's called Beefy Burger." And right away, like in the first
So
60 seconds of the episode, I was astounded by how good every this episode is written.
they're bombing around in the hot
Going for
raw.
a rip, yeah.
They're bombing around in the hot raw. Presley is talking about a science project that he has to work that he's working on. He has like a shortwave radio.
Oh, right, that he needs to get working, and Wrath is like, "What? Why don't you just give that to me? I could whip one up in a jiffy." And instead of being like, "No, I need to work on it on my own," he's like, "Okay."
No, no, not yet. The radio ends up getting trashed in the battle. That's why
Right,
Wrath. That's
that's
why
why.
Wrath.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
right. You're right.
So they drive to the burger joint. They go up to the drive-through. Scarab's snake staff
Hecka.
Hecka as
They've got a
as
headset on,
as voiced by Air Razor from Beast Wars.
and she's sitting in like the drive-through window,
And she's like
talking to the mic with a headset on.
and she's like complaining about like why they're there and doing this, and Scarab is like, well, according to my scouts tell me that the mummies frequent these locations such as this, and I'm
So they
like,
took this over, or did they open their own franchise? Because this is a new one, Armand said. So my head canon is that they opened their own franchise of
they
Beefy Burger
just to set up the mummies.
just to set this up. And right away I'm like, oh, that, that's great because there's no human staff here.
Yeah,
Like Hecka even complains.
but
She's like, this is embarrassing.
the staff is a staff.
Oh,
The staff of this restaurant is a literal staff.
and Scarab comes out and he's like, hey, it'll work. Don't worry. My spies have figured this out. And indeed, it cuts to the rest of the staff. And I can't remember what like the putties are called. The
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Anybody that
Doesn't
watched the
matter.
show can find out. But yeah, they've got basically golems, like a made out of sand, kind of like henchmen for the main characters to punch around, right? And they're fucking in full outfit, flipping patties in the back, like fully committed. And I'm like, holy shit. I right away I'm like, this is high caliber. This is way above like a lot of anything I could like ask for. Like I've never even watched episode to episode, and that's how hype I am for this. And indeed, they pull up, and right before they get to the window, Armand is like, "The burgers here are flame broiled,"
And then
and I'm
Hecka immediately like starts spewing fire at them.
opens up the window and just spews fire at it. And again, every 10 seconds, I'm like, "Fuck, yes." 10 out of 10.
And so they speed away, and three of them, all of them except Nefertina, jump out and do we. This is the first time in the episode we get the transformation sequence where they're like, "With the strength of Ra." Now I knew what did you think of this, Cal? Because I knew what to expect because I remember this transformation
This
sequence.
transformation. So the premise for this going in, I was like, what a bizarre premise. This couldn't have been like extremely popular. And it took me approximately 5 seconds into their transformation sequence and the puns and
The
the ancient
music is
Egypt
hype.
and the music or whatever, and the camera angles and the animation of the transformation sequence. It's just hype. You know what each one is, right? Like you have the sorcerer, you have like the leader who can like fly, you've got the big tough guy who now has like ancient Egyptian like hypertech magitech armor, right? And you've got like the Catwoman like with a whip, and it's man like this oh, man, I wish I had known about this when I was a kid, I'm telling you. Because it's probably one of my more favorite transformation sequences.
Yeah, it's sweet. I really like the animation in this show in general. It's very anime influenced, but it's not quite anime. It's
It's
like
somewhere between like TMNT and like,
a lot of cartoons in the 90s were doing an animation style similar to this. Like it's kind of inspired by the like Madhouse or like Ghost in the Shell type anime, but it's Americanized. So like this or like the 90s Spider-Man cartoon or
without
uh
reusing too much of the backgrounds and without it be a cartoon like this needs to know when to like show off the animation and when to make its jokes, and the pacing of this show is perfect. And a lot of cartoons, even good ones we've reviewed, right? Like Biker Mice from Mars and fuck, just a lot of them. It stumbles a bit. Whereas adults were like, okay, well, whatever. Yeah, like Leonardo's like sneaking. Sure, they're just inside of like the base somehow, or oh, we fast forward to like 2 days later for some reason or whatever. But like this is man, like I don't know who was on like the storyboarding for this, but like holy shit, man, like what did you go on to do? Because like even though it's like okay, we know what's gonna happen here, right? They transform, they kick the shit. I still love that the like the goons that they kick the butt of, they're dressed like fry cooks. And they get their butt kicked. But in the fight, like you had said, Armon is like crushes Presley's
his science project.
his
Yeah.
science project. Yeah,
So yeah, so they win. His science project gets trashed. They go back to the Sphinx, which is their like home base. It's their turtle lair, basically.
it's and I'm like, this is out in plain sight. Like, is this part of like an exhibit? Like, how do they
It
how do they get
is.
away with this? Okay,
It yeah, it's and setting aside opinions about like stealing like artifacts from ancient civilizations and moving them. But basically, if I remember correctly, they set up a replica of the Sphinx in the San Francisco harbor and actually like brought like a bunch of mummies and artifacts from Egypt and put them in
Which
there.
just happened to have real
Yeah,
mummies
yeah.
in them. Okay, so that when this kid like reincarnated, and then like it's all like destiny shit, right?
I think how he got
Scarab,
reincarnated. I think how he got the spirit of Ramses reincarnated into him was he went to the opening, the grand opening of this exhibit or something.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I can dig it.
So yeah, so they go back to the Sphinx, and Presley is like complaining about how his science project is it has been destroyed, and I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, "Oh, my shortwave radio has been trashed," and Wrath is like, uh, " leave it to me, Prince. By morning, it will be even shorter."
Yeah, what can I say? I've got a thing with technology. No, I always make he's been I swear he's been in multiple things like we've reviewed, but Scotty,
Oh, Scott McNeil was in everything in the 90s.
yeah. And I always do the joke of talking like Rat Trap whenever Scott McNeil comes up. But no, his range uh is great. Like I'm not ripping on him for always sounding like Rat Trap because he doesn't. That's just what I'm most familiar with because we have a Transform we have a Beast Wars podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scott McNeil, who is the most British of the Egyptian mummies. It's no, it's formal. It's formal. That's what it is. And he's like, no, no problem. I just yada yada ancient like super tech into it. It's fine. It'll work exactly as you need it to. And he's like, okay. And this comes
He just
in.
he makes a comment about my point was he makes a comment akin to by tomorrow morning it will be as short as possible, or it will be even shorter because it's a shortwave radio. Anyway,
Oh, see, like minute to minute, there's jokes and puns and things in this. It's a joy.
yeah.
I love this because he's Presley's scrutinizing it, and he's like, I don't know. Can this pick up signals from the other side of the world?
And he's like, "My prince, it can even pick up signals from beyond the Western Gate."
Thank you, thank you. And I'm like, does he want to?
So, what it took me a couple minutes in the episode to actually remember, but so the fact that he says beyond the Western Gate is important because like when this energy transference happens, as it goes past the Golden Gate Bridge, you actually see briefly like as it passes through, as it passes underneath, you'll actually see some like ancient Egyptian like gold and like decor like appear on the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a portal there to like basically the spirit world.
Ah, interesting. Because I know there are natural like portals throughout the world, like ley lines and like Golden Gate Bridge is like one of them, and that sort of thing. And I was wondering if there was something like that because it's such a large like art like structure going over top water, and water has to do with like stargates, right? And I was wondering if it had something to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. So the what they call the Western Gate is the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's
That's what they
actually
call it.
it's a portal to like the underworld basically.
Ah,
Um anyway, so yeah, Presley is looking at this device that Wrath has made, and it's got like it's quite literally like it looks like a circuit board with like a golden obelisk sticking out of it.
yeah, with like runes, hieroglyphics on
Yeah.
it.
So
And
he takes it to school and gets his teacher to
yeah, he's like, oh, it'd probably even pick up signals from Mars. And Mr. Old man teacher uh
yeah,
would give me a C or something.
Mr. Prescott or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something like that. So he takes it to school and shows it to his teacher, and he's like, he looks at it and he's like, this doesn't something akin to this doesn't look like any shortwave radio I've seen. And so
Does
Presley
it
goes,
even work? And he turns
yeah,
it on.
he tries to turn it on and nothing happens. And he's like, and he's like, Presley, you were supposed to build it yourself.
And
He's on
so
to him right away.
here's the thing, and this is another one of the, again, 30, every third, like, fuck, like, I really liked this. Can you tell? Um, Something about kids is when they think they're being really clever, they don't realize that people older than them, the longer they've been around, the more the greater their bullshit detector is. And I'm
Yep.
sorry, kids, like 15 to 20, you will never ever fool an adult. And when you think you did, it's just that they're letting you get away with it because they don't have any fucks to give.
I've
They know, man.
I've
They
run
all
into this
know.
because a lot of my subordinates at my
Yeah.
work, at my current workplace, are all most of them are teenagers. I've run into this so much where
Well, you even told me like a certain story involving like eggs where like they were like, oh, they must have fell. I was like, yeah, okay.
or I had one who tried to come up with the um, he brought his friends through the receiving bay,
Uh,
and I scolded him for that. And he's like, "Oh, but the boss said that we could, like if we needed to bring a customer back here, as long as we escorted them, then it was fine." And I'm like, "But they weren't customers." He's like, "No," and I was like, "They were your friends." He's like, "Right," and I was like, "Good try though, good try." So yeah, so I run into that a lot where they like
the older I get, the more I can
where
detect it.
where these teenagers will like try and come up with like these like really elaborate excuses or like try and explain something away in a way
It's
where
because,
it's like I can tell I can tell you're trying,
and it's
but I can
because
see
it
right
works
through
on
it.
their peers. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, they manage to like bullshit their peers, but it's like something happens. For me, it's like it was like 28 to 32 when you just like move away from being like a young adult into like an adult for, and it was
Right.
this very all of a sudden distance. Like when I was like 26, I didn't feel that different from like a 22-year-old. But then like 28,
At
29,
28, yeah, that was about when
I
I started picking up on it too.
I felt so different from like people that were like 22, 23, 24. And yeah, it's I'm imagining this Mr. Prescott or whatever, because he's like, Presley, you know you're supposed to do the project yourself. And instead of being like, oh geez, you got me, he's like, oh, I must have left the instructions in my locker. I'll be right
Yeah,
back.
let me go check my notes. So he goes to his locker and he's like, "Man, I really should have studied this before I came to class. I should have studied Rath's notes before I came to
Yeah, he
class."
left him like a little instruction
Yeah.
booklet for it. And while he's gone, Mr. Prescott's like, oh, that's the problem. It's not plugged in. And I love that there's this ancient like Egyptian magitech. Like
Yeah.
ancient Egyptians, ancient aliens theorists and like ancient advanced civilizations, like uh not historians, but like conspiracy theorists, historians, fringe scientists. There we go. That believed in like advanced technology of the past. They must have loved this show. I'm just saying. And he's like, oh, it just needs to get plugged in. And I love that there's like a monolith on this that's made out of like
The
hieroglyphics carved onto
it
gold.
it's an obelisk.
Or sorry, not monolith. A monolith is like a domino, right? Like a flat thing.
Yes.
Yeah. An obelisk, and he plucks it in, and he gets lasered like right away.
Yeah, and
And I'm like,
here's that thing that I
was
was
this
talking
supposed
about.
to do that?
Here's that thing that I was talking about earlier, where like I swear I've seen this in a sci-fi show before, where two characters like are linked by some electronic device and they end up getting inadvertently swapped.
I was transported to a faraway land. Yeah. And boy, usually like these are like a chore or a pain, but he gets sent to like the afterlife
Yeah, he gets sent beyond the Western
of
Gate.
Yeah, the afterlife of
Like we even
like
see his,
Egyptian mythos. Yeah.
we see his like energy like go through the Western Gate. So he goes beyond the Western Gate, and
Yeah, he's in like yellow energy. And um there's faint like sphinxes, like silhouettes of sphinxes at the bridging parts
yeah,
of
yeah, that's what I was talking about
yeah.
earlier.
And he switches places with a green energy.
Yeah, and so this other energy source like comes back from beyond the Western Gate and re materializes as a uh, sexy sorceress lady in the
Um
classroom.
does does it. Before we go there, we get to see like the afterlife. Um and he's in this desert with like crazy skies, floating floating energon mountains, and kind of like a boatman goes by with, and one of them's holding like a glowing staff, and the other one has this like gigantic, huge built body, and he's like the oarman or whatever. And we look, and it's actually a golem piloted like Men in Black style
By a
with
scarab.
like a little scarab, like
Yeah.
with levers. And he turns to the old like Mr. Prescott, and he's like, "Yo," like he waves at him, and Mr. Prescott's like, just waves back, and he just
Yeah.
waves back, and I'm like, "Fuck, man, this is great." But like you said, there's a hot,
Sexy
sexy pharaoh
so,
lady
so so
there.
sexy sorceress lady is like looking around. She's kind of confused by her surroundings. Presley like comes back into the classroom and she immediately like disguises herself to make
Puts her
herself
hand up, glows purple, boom, and becomes like a modern
like business suit.
dressed
So
teacher,
so here
semi-formal. There we go.
so here I'm wondering like how does she was confused by her surroundings and like where she was. How does she know what modern fashion looks like?
And I was hoping you'd like bring that up, because she's even got like well, one, she had like fierce eyebrows and makeup even before she
Yeah.
transformed. And if you know anything from like Egyptian art and that kind of stuff, like uh their eyeliner game was fucking on point. Um
So Presley noted.
what I think, sorry, what I think is kind of just it's like a weird passive magic. Like she just kind of used magic and her surroundings to kind of just be like, make me look like I belong kind of spell. Yeah, why not?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Either way, she's a hot teacher.
So Presley is all hot for teacher, and he's like, "Hey, where's Mr. Prescott?" And she's like, "Oh, he's gone. I've taken his place." And Presley's like, "Oh, like a substitute teacher?" And she's like, yeah,
Yeah, kid,
yeah.
yeah.
Let's go with that. Substitute teacher. I'm Chantra." And he's like, "Oh, hey, Miss Chantra." And so she looks at the radio, the communication device that Wrath made, and she sees the golden obelisk, and she's like, "I recognize this handiwork. This could only be the work of Wrath."
And the kid, being a kid who thinks a teacher's hot, but also is a kid, is like, huh? What? Well, I wouldn't say any man alive made that. Oh, I mean, it wasn't made by Wrath. I mean, who's Wrath? Awooga.
Yeah, pretty much. So immediately we find out that she has some like mind control power. So she's like, "Look into my eyes."
Her eyes glow red, and he's like, I am your slave, Enchantra. Please do with me as you will. Hubba hubba, ding ding.
Yeah, and she's like, so tell me everything." And he's like, "Yeah, I am the reborn spirit of Prince Rapses, and Wrath is one of my guardians sent to protect me." And she's
And
like,
this is
"Now,"
my Millennium puzzle piece.
and she's
Millennium
like,
artifact.
and so while she still is like, has influence over him, she's like, "All right, now listen here. You don't work for Wrath anymore. You hear? You and your boys. You work for me now."
You see? I'm taking over town. See?
The
There's only
Federate.
room for one. There's only room for one ancient Egyptian sorcerer around here, see?
Now listen here, Bucko. The Federation's taken over this joint.
Oh, fuck. I forgot about that episode.
That is my
10 out of
favorite.
10.
That is
Of
my
course it
favorite
is.
episode of the original Star Trek, the original series. A piece of the action.
Fuck. And it's great. Isn't it great too? Because piece of the action, that's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're disguised and like Spock is obviously still Spock, they unquestioningly take everything he says as if he belongs. Which is like my favorite part of any
Well,
original
here's
go
the
ahead.
thing though with that episode is this is an alien planet. It's not that they've gone
It's
back in
not a
time.
holodeck or they didn't go back in time. It's
This
straight up an alien
this
planet.
is
I
an
remember
alien
that.
planet who
Yeah.
has encountered the Federation before. So like a Vulcan showing up isn't that unusual to them.
Right.
They're a highly
I
adaptable
forgot
and
about that.
imitative
Yeah.
species, and
They've advanced quickly, right?
someone broke the Prime Directive and left a book about 1930s Chicago there, and that basically became
Specifically.
and that became their the entire basis for their civilization.
I love that it propelled their technology and like medicine and accents and like architecture, like everything. Dress to the 1930s.
In the span of like 60 years.
Yeah. They go from like smashing rocks together and like worshiping a sun god to to all right, she, your boys, they work for me, she. Including like fucking Tommy guns. Oh,
So Presley goes back to the Sphinx and he tells
oh,
the
I
mummy.
forgot. There's one funny part with Prescott before we jump into that. Prescott's like in the Egyptian like afterlife, right?
The
And he's
it's
running
just
around
the
being like
underworld.
the underworld. There we go. The underworld, and he finds no river Styx, but he does say there must be a logical explanation for this because there's a logical explanation for everything. And then shit starts getting wild and starts chasing him, and he runs away, and he's
Well,
like, "Oh,
the
I have
moon
to."
the moon turns
I
into a
forgot.
giant bull's head
Bull.
and is like, first day here.
Hey, first time. And he's like, ah. And he runs away and he's like, I have to wake up. And him yelling, wake up, like awakens a bunch of like mythological like creatures, like a minotaur
From the
and the
rocks.
griffin and
Yeah.
from like entombed in rocks. And I'm like, wait, holy shit, is this guy a wizard? He just like awoken a bunch of like servants of the underworld. And I thought that was cool.
So Presley goes back to the Sphinx and he tells the mummies basically, it's not you, it's me. I have
I can't learn anything from you
I
anymore,
have a
mom
new
and
hot
dads.
girlfriend.
I have a new teacher now. Have you seen her ass?
But specifically, what he says is that there is just nothing more that you can teach me. I'm sorry.
There's nothing more you can teach me now. I'm sorry. And Wrath is immediately like, that line sounds familiar.
And we get a flash.
Hmm.
We get a flashback to 3,000 years ago, ancient Egypt, where Wrath, who is still alive and human, is telling that exact same line to Chantra.
Yeah, and the gist of it, which we already mentioned, was she was Wrath's student, but the Pharaoh ordered him to move all of his like time and like full-time tutor Prince
Tutelage
Ramses
to Ramses, yeah.
and to teach him the ways of the smarts and the magic. And Chantra's pissed and she's all like, oh, he would never be as powerful as me. And she shows off by like summoning some snakes or some shit. And he's like, okay, yeah, I get it. But it's probably for the best because I was I was falling for you.
Oh, that's later in the episode that we find that out.
Right. Oh, right. He's like, no, you'll always be my favorite student, and perhaps even more than that. And she's like, fuck you, dude, and kind of like brushes off his hint that he was hoping for something more. So this episode has everything. You know, it's got a little she denies caring for him later in the episode, but why go through all this trouble to fuck with him?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like that really like that thing of like having like a really spiteful ex. It's like they hate you, but they're just so angry
But they
that
also wanted to be with you, and
but they wanted to be with you, but like they but
they
like
can't ask to be with you.
you broke it off with them, and like instead of just moving on, they're so, even though like they still care about you, they're still like so spiteful and
They're
feel
lashing
hurt
out.
that they're lashing out. Yeah, it's kind of what she's doing here.
And there are a lot of tropes where that can be corny or cheesy. Nope, it rides that just on the line enough for me to really appreciate.
Well, and what I find interesting about this episode too, and this is actually confirmed later in the episode by Chantra, is it actually has nothing to do with Ramses or Presley. Unlike most of this series, like it's like everyone's going after Presley because of who he is, but no, she's actually like he's not really the goal here. She's just using him as a pawn to get to Wrath.
Yeah, he's like, I
Just
don't care about this kid.
yeah,
And that's kind of cool. Yeah.
yeah,
So in the modern era, there's a scene, video viewers, my background has, when Presley had left. He's like, okay, bye. I have to go home. My teacher is coming over to tutor me. I'm like, your teacher's coming over to tutor you?
yeah.
So after that flashback, we cut to the home and they're sitting in Presley's living room with his mom doing like dishes in the background in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And she's like speed reading all these books. And she's like, oh, more, science, math. I need to know more. And the mom comes out and she's like, so that's weird. Mr. Prescott never came and tutored Presley privately.
Also,
Sound
it seems like you're learning along about science along with him. Didn't you learn all this stuff at college?
and she's like, college. Yes, whatever this thing is, I can pursue more knowledge there. And that's when the mom's like, Miss Chandra, can I talk to you alone? And
Hey,
right
bitch.
away I'm like,
Okay, bitch. We need to go have a chat.
yes. And I'm like, a parent actually parenting properly? Because, okay, listeners, we're recording this on November 15th, 2022.
Yep.
There's this trope, mostly in the 80s, but it went on into the 90s, where an older man kind of hitting on or being charming to a younger woman was creepy most of the time. But an older woman, especially an attractive one, hitting on or flirting with an underage boy was like, way to go, man. Oh, wow. Like, you must be really cool. An example I think we've mentioned before is Flight of the Navigator. I
Yeah.
can't think of other examples, but it's rampant. If you're as old as Siege and I, it's pretty rampant. And this does the opposite. There's a parent who's actually like, hey, come over here, bitch. Like, like you said, and pulls her into the kitchen. She's like, hey, I don't know what's like going on here or whatever, but I think the only reason he's like studying this much is because he's got a crush on you.
Yeah.
And the teacher's like, I don't know whatever this crush is, but I do think I'll be taking your underage son to college with me. And she's like, no.
No.
Like, what the fuck?
And so Chantra does her like her mind
Well,
spell thing.
she says something before the mind spell. She's all like, hey, listen, he's obsessed with you. You need to like be the professional and like fuck off. And he's all like, yes, I do have that effect on most people. And she's all like, oh, I don't know what's going on with you, but like, hey, and then all of a sudden weird gatekeeping, like woman to woman gatekeeping comes in, and she's like, I don't think you should be wearing like so much
Oh, because
mascara.
she her thing is she's like look into when she's about to cast a
Right.
spell on someone. She's like look into my eyes, and Presley's mom is like, I think you're wearing a little too much mascara, which I don't think
You
that's
know what?
gatekeeping.
No, you
That's
no,
just a
you're right.
joke.
That's a burn because
It's a
it's
burn.
obvious this woman,
Yeah,
she doesn't want this woman near her kid, and she's fucking right
yeah.
because she's fucking evil sorcerer, undead sorceress, right? And I just the reason I broke it all down and I pointed that out and I pointed that like unhealthy like trope of like it's cool for like young boys to like get a kiss on the cheek from an older woman. Um,
Well, it was cool when you were a young boy. Like it was cool from that perspective. It was never cool from an adult's perspective. Like
uh,
other adults were looking like
I
when
hope
those things would
so.
happen, other adults were looking at these women and being like, "What is wrong with you?"
I hope so because it's in media a lot, and it's really refreshing to see like the mom
Remember in
step
the
in
90s
here.
it seemed like there were so many cases of women going to trial for sleeping with underage male
That didn't
students.
stop, man. Ooh, that didn't stop. It increased in the 2000s and some into the 2010s. I'm thinking it's simmering off now. And that funny thing is, whenever it's a male teacher and a female student, the comments of an article or whatever always like hang him,
Yeah.
kill him, castrate him, and like impale impale him, give him a slow death. And whenever it's like a teacher, which and a female teacher and a male student, it's always like, where were these teachers when I was a boy?
Yeah, that's
And
just
but she's
dude.
hot.
That's just dudes being gross and
Yeah,
stupid and
yeah.
misogynistic.
Well, oh yeah, definitely. And it's like it's that whole oh well, it, that's very rampant, that double like standard, and even in media it's often worded badly. What I mean by that is it's just like, oh, it's the R word whenever it's like a male teacher and a female student, but whenever it's a female teacher and a male student, it's often, oh, alleged sexual relationship or physical relationship with like student. And it's always like kind of just like worded, and it's never worded as really what it is because we're coming off the coattails of a culture where only men can sexually assault men or women, not the other way around. So, anyways, I'll get off my fucking soapbox here. The whole point I was trying to make is it's refreshing to see a cartoon have a mom instead of just doing dishes or being like, what am I going to do with him? Like in a cartoon, be like, hey, lady, get the fuck away from my kid. And I
One thing
like
that
that.
I thought was kind of weird in this scene was Presley's mom was like, "Hey, where's Mr. Prescott? Have you seen him around?" So it's like we as the viewer know that he's missing, but like, why would Presley's mom know or care?
Oh, because she's like, oh, I'm his new teacher. And she was like, oh, well, what happened to Mr. Prescott?
Hmm.
That was her reasoning. But anyways, like you said, she's like, look into my eyes. And she's like, I'm going to take your son to college with me, and you're okay with it. And she's like, okay, mommy. And go. And yeah, that's that.
So they go into so Chantra and Presley go to Berkeley College. I found like a lot of cartoons in the 90s, like in the 90s especially, they would come up with fake names for schools.
Not this place.
No, they actually like straight up just name check
I
Berkeley.
I love that she doesn't like get in a car or cab or whatever. She just goes outside and they go into like a magical purple energy orb and like fly there.
Yeah, because Presley is like, "Oh, how are we gonna get there?" And she's like, "Oh, let me show you. I can do way cooler things than Wrath ever could, like this." And so they go into like a magic bubble and like fly over there. There's this little bit back at the at the Sphinx where the mummies are like really are in their sarcophagi and they're really
They
bored.
hang out with their arms crossed over their chests and they're
Uh,
just talking to each other.
much like the Borg in Star Trek, they have to like go into those like regeneration onto those
Oh,
regeneration
okay.
pads.
It's kind
The
of like the Borg, yeah.
the mummies, they're powered by their amulets that they have around their neck, and they have to rest in their sarcophagi for the amulets to recharge.
Rad.
So if they spend, and I think it comes up in a couple of episodes, if they spend too long away, essentially their amulets run out of the batteries die
And
in
they
their
can't
amulets.
transform or
They
something
can't
like that.
transform, and eventually, if enough time passes, they'll just like crumble to dust.
Too much energon.
Yeah.
Transform to beast mode.
So they're all bored, just chilling back at the Sphinx in their sarcophagi, and
Yeah, they're like, let's
our
contact.
yeah
I miss Presley. Let's contact him.
yeah Armon gets the idea that like, hey, what if we just call Presley and ask him to come over?
It works with pizza.
It works with pizza. So they go to a payphone.
Give me the
Armon,
coinage of the great pharaoh, George Washington.
give me the round piece of.
Round
Armon
piece
is
of currency.
Armon is trying to dial the phone. He's like, I need one round metal piece with the great pharaoh George Washington on it.
I love
And,
that.
and Nefertina is like, oh, I have one. And they all cross their arms over their chest and they're like, praise be to the great pharaoh George Washington. And so Armon dials and he calls the pizza place. He's and
And he's like,
there's
is Presley there?
and at the pizza place they're like, what, Presley? There's no Presley. And he's like, oh, he doesn't know Presley. And Wrath is like, you idiot, you have to dial Presley's number. And Armon's like, there's more than one number.
um,
Ian, let me
genuinely,
do it.
let me do it. Oh, and genuinely, like I've said this like 6 times. Like the show doesn't stop with how clever it is.
Right.
I loved that.
So Wrath calls Presley's mom, and on the phone she's all like, he's not here, he went to Berkeley College with his new teacher
With his
Chantra.
new hot MILF teacher, Chantra.
And Wrath is like, great Scott, we must go immediately, the prince is in danger. And so they
Ramsey's beard. We must get there immediately. And
great
there's a comical
great
scene.
Anubis's beard, great Anubis's ears, we must be off.
By the by the swarms of locusts. We must we must part the ocean and get to Berkeley Palace at once. And they did a clever little gag here because it's shown them real close next to each other. It zooms out and it shows that they're all jammed into this phone booth,
Yeah.
and they go and they all like comically like explode and break the phone booth. Just little things like that that are like 90s perfect touches. They didn't have to add that, but I appreciate it.
So they jump in the hot raw and they end up at a toll
Still can't get
bridge.
over that it's called the hot raw.
So they jump in the hot raw and head to a toll bridge, and Nefertina is like, uh, quick, I need many round metal pieces with the great George Washington on them. And
Here
so
you
she
go. And they all like empty their pockets and give them to her, and she tosses it into the toll booth.
and then all in unison they put their arms over their chests again and are like, praise be to the great pharaoh George Washington.
Is this an American show?
Yeah.
Berkeley, George Watt. Here's the thing. Like, I kind
Well,
of love
it's
that.
set in San Francisco, right?
I kind of love that, like, hidden patriotism. Not like G.I. Joe levels where it's funded by like the US military, but I do enjoy that kind of gag.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, really, like they're from a time where the pharaoh, which was the leader of the
Yeah.
country, the pharaoh was regarded as being a god.
And indeed, he's one of the ancient old dudes who's has his head is carved into Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, it would make
He,
sense that they would just think that George Washington was a god
yeah,
that was worshipped by the people.
yeah. Oh man, I love that when they're leaving the mummy palace, um, the mouth of the Sphinx opens and like interconnects with like the ground floor of the exhibit, and they like pull out in their hot raw.
Yeah. That's a 90s thing too, right there.
Such a 90s thing. The sound effects. There's a special song that plays when they're
The song that's playing while they're like driving across the bridge,
yeah.
it's pretty hype.
Thank
It
you.
stuck out
I
to
was
you
like, did
too.
you notice that?
I
I'm like,
did, yeah.
because I rewinded it and I was like, do 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 do, and there's car squealing sounds and like Nefertiti's like fast and furious shifting, and I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Boop 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 boop. Boop. And yeah, they hightail it to Berkeley, which somehow I wonder where it doesn't matter. The show knows when things matter and when it doesn't matter. Never mind all the traffic that's on the bridge that sees this fucking car like hauling ass right across the Golden Gate Bridge. Chandra and Presley are just like hanging out in like one of the libraries at
Yeah.
Berkeley with like mounds of books. And she's like, knowledge is powers, Presley. And he's just chilling, like kind of looking bored. And she's got like an arm over her and she's like speed reading books. And I'm like, damn, I can barely make it through like a book in a month. And this lady's like absorbing like the entirety of like Berkeley's like library in like hours.
Well, she is a supernatural being from the
Yeah.
underworld.
From
So the
the
mummies are
underworld. And they pull up and no security on site because why would there, right?
yeah, it's the 90s. 9/11
Yeah.
hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, that's right. And Wrath is like, no, this is something that I have to do alone, which is fucking hilarious because he eats his words in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, he runs in there and like he gets like blown out the wall with like a bunch of like
She like
books.
telekinesis is like a bunch of books, and I was half expecting her to be like, ha, Wrath, you seem to have forgotten. Knowledge is power, which is another big 90s theme. And just like telekinesis book blasts him like out the window. And he flies and he lands like in front of everybody as they're just chilling.
And he makes a pun. I can't remember what it is though. It's something to do with books.
Oh, he falls on the ground and they run over to help him. And they were kind of like gossiping and they're like, who is this Chantra anyway? Apparently one of Wrath's old students. And they're like, what happened, Wrath? And Wrath is like, oh, surrounded by books, and he's like, just doing some light reading.
There it is, yeah.
I thought he said night reading the first time I watched it. And
Mhm.
I'm like, night reading? Is it because they're at night and it rhymes with light?
With the strength of Raw.
And
We
here
get
we
another
go.
we get a full like this is the first full like transformation sequence with all of
This
them
is hype.
together. Because that
Usually there's like a minor one and then a full one when they need to kick full ass.
well when they transformed earlier it was three of them because Nefertina was driving the Hot Raw. And then when the Hot Raw crashed, she transformed solo.
A little bit later, yeah.
Yeah. But this is the first time we actually got like all of them together.
It's hype. They all have a different color. Let's kick tut. And Chantra goes into her like real form.
Yeah. Which just means she's more scantily clad.
Hell yeah. I'm for it.
And so like a big battle between amongst them ensues.
There's magic and whips, and she like uses magic to counter Ja-Kal's like fire arrows and all sorts of shenanigans.
The eye lasers Wrath at one point.
Oh my, I forgot about when they're inside of like the library, she's like, look into my eyes, and he just pulls out a mirror.
Yeah, and she says she does the whole look into my eyes thing, but instead of doing like a charm spell, she actually just eye lasers.
Motherfucking eye lasers.
Which I kind of liked because it's like normally like when she does that, she's like luring someone in to like hypnotize them. But no, she's luring him in, but instead of hypnotizing him, she's just like eye lasering.
And my headcanon for that is that she knows that she can hypnotize. And so she's pretending to hypnotize and then just trying to eye laser him.
Yeah, yeah. It's basically like a sucker punch, essentially.
Yeah, because look into my eyes and surprise! And eye lasers him and he whips out a mirror and he's like, ha, nice try, bitch. I know all your tricks. And the eye lasers like bounce off. And I love the idea that this guy just like walks around with like a pocket mirror at all times, like a hand mirror.
So yeah, so a bunch of fighting ensues. Chantra's like kind of cleaning house against them.
Yeah. And I think the final it's like, oh, leave the boy alone and I'll go with you. And she's like, I don't give a shit about this kid.
Yeah,
It's you I
or
want to destroy.
yeah, I will go with you. I will surrender. I will be with you forever. Just please let the prince go. And she's like, I don't care about him. This was always about killing you.
Also, yeah, I don't want you to come and be with me. I just want to kill you, loser.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh,
Oh,
shit.
well,
Eh,
I wasn't really expecting to hear that. But okay, I understand.
very well.
Tis your wishes. Um, would have been really nice to have been given a heads up about that, before I decide committed in my head to spending my life with you in service of the prince.
But this is fine too.
If it's what you wish.
I suppose. And he's like, but first, I summoned the serpents of the underworld. And she crosses her arms, and she's like floating now, right? As any good sorceress
And
does.
she's like, you fucking idiot. There are no serpents of the underworld anymore. Bozo, that was 3,000 years ago. He's like, not literal serpents, you stupid bitch. I was speaking metaphorically. There are
Surprise!
surprise underground cabling. You don't
And
know what
they're
those
made
are
out of
because
electricity.
you don't know what those are because you've only been here for 6 hours.
And don't ask why I know what they are, because, I've never done any underground construction, but I know what they are somehow. Ha ha!
But I've been to a library.
I've been to a library. I mean, so have you, but fuck you.
And
And
somehow this is enough to defeat her.
completely.
Yeah.
So we get this show has everything. We got hot ancient Egyptian sorceress. We got tentacles wrapping around her and her straining in and trying to fight it. We got the underworld. We got heartache. We get great Egyptian themed puns.
Yeah.
Patriotism. But yeah, like you said, the tentacle cables. They apparently, because I guess this is connected to the entire city's power grid of San Francisco.
Yep.
It shows the city and the whole city kind of flickers and then like dies down. And I'm like, oh, whoa, he's really zapping this bitch.
And somehow this is enough to convert her back to energy and send her back beyond the Western Gate.
One of the ley lines is a capstone to the library, which is shaped like an obelisk.
Yeah.
And so the electricity kind of jumps over to the lightning rod or the obelisk and sends her back through the Western Gate.
And brings Mr. Prescott back.
Does the switcheroo back as he was like getting eaten by a griffin or something.
Yep.
And he's like, wow, that was a crazy dream. I'll have to make sure that I drink my Metamucil before 6 p.m. next time. Or some stupid thing like that. And when
no more tomato juice before bed.
um, and Chandra gets switched back and she's underneath the griffin as the griffin was about to eat Prescott, and she's like, get off me, you idiot.
Yep.
And I'm like, or or should you get off of her? And I guess she holds some sort of sway in the underworld, being a powerful sorceress and all.
I think she's kind of in charge of things over there.
Would make sense.
Yeah.
So they're driving back, and for some reason, it's just Wrath, and maybe they're in the back seat. It's just Wrath, and they're still in their superpower uh like form, by the way. They're in the car driving back to town. And Presley's like, Wrath, it's funny. Even though I know Chantra was evil, I keep thinking about how beautiful she was. And Wrath is like, ah, so do I, my prince. So do I. And I'm like, man, being a hot bitch just gives you a free pass to do anything with these two.
Right?
I'm just like, you fucking simps. So do I. No, like, if a bitch is trying to kill her, you have my permission to kill her right back.
And that's pretty much the episode, isn't it?
And that's literally the episode. They're like, oh, yes, she may have been evil and tried to kill me. And like her image of like her folding her arms, like smirking, like fades in to the
But
background as Wrath is like
but
being like,
but have you seen those titties?
and that ass, my God, you could bounce a metallic coin with the Pharaoh of George Washington right off of it. Just fuck.
An ass as big as the Nile itself.
And hips as wide as the Nile, and
Hips as wide as the Red Sea was parted.
wish to part her thighs like Moses parted the Red Sea. Oh, and but you can't ask us to. We can't end the episode on many puns. I need to pull up like an ancient Egyptian like pun like list off of the internet to keep going with that. And
Right.
with our very thorough but enjoyable recap of Goodbye, Mr. Chops.
Chips.
Chops. Goodbye, Mr.
Cheops.
Chops. That is Mummies Alive. Here on the Lasercomb podcast,
My cat looks
we
kind of sinister right now.
we play Sinistar and act sinister. Catstifer Siege. You just
Yeah.
watched a random episode of Mummies Alive. Would you tune in next week?
100%. I wasn't actually This is one of those shows where I'm like, okay, it was the fucking hypest shit ever when I was 12. But when I'm 37, and am I still gonna think it's hype? Probably not. No, it's still fucking hype. I still love this show. It has aged quite. It's very of its time, but for me, like it's aged quite well. I really like the animation style. Like I said, the animation style is very like influenced by like mid '90s anime, but it still has some Americanized. It still has some Americanized stylings to it.
Great
Music,
character design.
music is hype. Yeah, the character design is great. Yeah, I'm still on board with this show. Cool concept too.
I had never watched this. Like I'd known about it, but I had never watched this, and this is the first episode I'd ever watched. And like, boy, did I miss out. Definitely tune in next week. And I should go. I watched it with my partner
Yeah.
who didn't know about it either. And she was like, holy shit, this is the best thing you've watched for, for that. And I'm like, maybe.
This has been a show that's been like when I first came up with the idea for this podcast, like in like summer of 2021. This was one of the first shows that I thought of.
Oh, absolutely. It's been mentioned here and there, either on Twitter or our listeners or us or here and there. And man, it's does everything. It archetypes them just enough that you know who they are, but it also makes them interesting, the characters, right? Like this was a Wrath episode,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
it's just
every one
funny
of the
too.
every one of the if I recall correctly, every one of the mummies gets like a few episodes
Yeah,
dedicated to them specifically.
yeah, and just like it's just a joy. Like the bad guys here, the main bad guys like Scarab and Heka, they were for the intro, right? But they weren't the primary, like they were just the opening conflict, and Chantra was the main conflict. And just like a show not being afraid to just like do something like them opening up their own burger franchise so that they can get the drop on Presley and the Mummies is.
Just under the hopes that the mummies will come to this exact burger place.
And then as soon as they're complaining, they're like, "Oh, there they are." I want to know how many customers they serviced before they served before. Do you know what I mean? Like that'll be like 7.85, and then you just like pull up and there's just a snake working the counter. Maybe she takes your money. Maybe she blows flames on you and you die a horrible death. Just little things like that where the show can be serious but also know when to be like funny is the
You know
writing.
how much money I've sunken into this establishment waiting for these goddamn mummies to show up?
Now we need to keep this operable for 6 months, or dang it, I won't make my capital back.
Yeah.
So I like the idea that Scarab keeps
we've already encountered the mummies, but I am several $100,000 in the red. We are going to need to keep this establishment open for at least another 8 months before we're able to break even.
I like the idea that they can just like now in the town that they just operate this like same thing with like the golems like being the fry cooks in the back. They
Shabties.
just
They're
operate
called shabties.
shabties. Yeah,
It just
thank you.
popped into my head.
They mentioned it once in the episode, but it was in one ear and out the other. I like the idea of all of them just like working there now. Like the what's the human version of the scarab? Like he's got like a he uses in public. I read it somewhere. Harris
Harris
Stone.
Stone, yeah.
And of course he's super wealthy and everything, right? So I like the idea of him just like having this joint here now.
Yeah.
And yeah, is there anything else we wanna go out on? Any
Nope.
finishing thoughts other than we're a cat and a lion apparently?
One quick thing. Apparently this show was another half-hour toy commercial, but I don't remember ever seeing toys for this anywhere. But apparently they were made by Hasbro.
Really?
Yeah, never saw toys for this show anywhere. At least I don't remember seeing toys because I totally would have bought them.
Let's see here. Mummies Alive toys. Oh, they look really good too. Not perfect, like very different from the show, but like shockingly like high quality. Huh.
Right. I'll have to take a look see. Anyway, that has been episode 52 of the Lasercomb podcast. Best way to support the show is go to patreon.com/lasercomb, LAZORCOMB. We're at the single $5 tier. You get to pick a show for us to review a random episode of on this very podcast. You also get preamble audio, commentary tracks, and our news and current events program, Lasercomb Tonight. So if you want to get in on that, go to patreon.com/lasercomb. Follow me on Twitter at Lasercomb, spelled the same way, or Cal, they can follow you at.
They can follow me at NeoCal on Twitter, NEO_KAL.
On the next episode of the Lasercomb podcast, we are going to be kicking off a block of several episodes. Not even going to be a themed month at this point, but for probably at least like the next like 2, maybe 3 months, we're going to be doing Patreon sponsored shows.
I feel like this was almost a Patreon sponsored show because at least a couple of our listeners were fond of Mummies Alive.
Right? Shout out to you, Jared.
Yeah, especially
Jared.
Jareb. Sorry, we've been watching Mummies Alive. We got Scarab,
and Jared. I conflated the two. Shout out to you, Jared, because I know on the Discord you when I posted a GIF of Mummies Alive, you picked up on it right away.
Yeah.
We are going to be kicking off this next block of Patreon sponsored shows with a pick by our patron Lewis. Shout out to him. And the show we're going to be watching is a little show called Manimal. And
Manimal.
I'm going with this one first because I've heard of it, and some podcasters that I'm fond of did an episode of a show about it. I've heard Manimal come up a lot. So yeah, that's so I was excited when Lewis pitched Manimal to us. So figure out which episode of Manimal we're going to be watching. I'm gonna hit the old screen share.
I'm watching the intro, and I must say, that's kind of exactly what I thought it was going to be.
All right, so Manimal had 8 episodes, so one random number between 1 and 8. And here we go. 4.
A mighty number 4.
Female of the species.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Wow.
this is an older let's see here. After a girl is found living with wolves in the forests of Sultanpur, India, she is the topic of discussion at a local university where she is being held.
An attempt is made on her life. Jonathan takes her into his care and protection. Female of the species.
I myself am quite popular with the females of the species. Talking about cats, of course.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, we'll be back next time with that. And until then, I've been the Siege, one of your hosts.
And I am Ja-Kal, your other host.
Thanks for listening. We will mummify you next week.